Story 1. I am a photographer, someone who finds solace in the quiet of nature. The dense, ancient forests of the Pacific Northwest have always called to me, with their towering pines and mist-shrouded scrub. This time, I ventured into a remote area near Mount Rainier, searching for the perfect shot that would capture the wild beauty of the landscape. The deeper I went, the more enamored I became of the quiet majesty that surrounded me. But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees, I realized I had gone too far. The comforting warmth of the daylight was fading, replaced by a creeping cold that seemed to seep into my bones. I turned to turn around, but the path I had taken was nowhere to be seen, swallowed up by the dense forest. Panic flashed through my mind, but I forced it down, determined to find my way. As I turned, a sound caught my ear, the unmistakable crunch of leaves underfoot. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't my own footsteps. I was standing still. I strained to listen, but the sound stopped, leaving only the eerie silence of the forest. Swallowing my fear, I continued walking, my steps quickening as the darkness around me deepened. The crunching started again, closer this time, almost in sync with my own hurried steps. My heart pounded as I turned, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. That was when I saw him, a tall, shadowy figure partially hidden behind a large pine tree. His outline was blurred by the darkness, but I could make out his outline, vague and motionless. Watching me, my stomach dropped, and cold sweat broke out on my skin. For a moment, I stood frozen in shock, unable to process what I was seeing. Then instinct took over. I dashed off, camera pounding against my chest as I ran, branches catching in my clothes. The forest seeming to close in around me. The footsteps behind me grew louder, faster, as if whoever or whatever was chasing me was getting closer. I didn't dare look back, my breathing coming in rapid, panicked gasps as I ran through the undergrowth. Just as I thought I couldn't run any further, the trees suddenly parted, revealing a dirt path. I stumbled onto it, my legs burning with exhaustion, but I didn't stop until I reached a small town on the edge of the forest. Panting and shaking, I ran into a local diner, my story spilling out between gasps. The locals exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale. "You saw him," one of them said quietly, their voices tinged with fear. "A watcher of the forest. He's been here for years, maybe centuries. They say he's a man who lost everything and is now cursed to wander the forest, following those who stray too far." The truth hit me like a punch in the gut. I'd heard the legend before, dismissed it as just a story. But now, as I sat there, shaking with the lingering terror of the encounter, I knew the truth. The watcher was real, and I'd come so close to becoming a watcher. Story 2. Camping trip to Blue Mountain National Park in Pennsylvania seemed like the perfect getaway. We were a group of 6 eager to get away from the noise of the city and immerse ourselves in the peace of the wilderness. The day was perfect. Blue skies, fresh air, and just enough challenging trails to keep things interesting. We spent the day hiking, laughing, and soaking in the beauty of the forest, feeling more alive with each step. But as night fell, the mood changed. The forest, once welcoming during the day, seemed to change, the trees casting long, twisted shadows in the dim light. The rustle of leaves, once a pleasant one, was now more of a whisper, and the wind, once a breeze, became cold and biting. We pitched our tents and huddled around the campfire, trying to shake off the unease that had gripped us. But no matter how hard we tried, the tension grew. The sounds of the night turned sinister. It began subtly, a rustle of leaves in the nearby bushes, a sound too cautious, too close to be the wind. We exchanged anxious glances, trying to laugh it off. But the laughter did not reach our eyes. "Did you hear that?" One of us whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackling of the fire. "Yeah, but it's probably nothing, right?" Another answered, though his uncertain tone betrayed the fear we all felt. Then, from deep in the woods, we heard that cry. A distant cry, faint at first, but unmistakable. It was the cry of something or someone. We froze, listening, hoping it was just our imaginations. But the screams grew louder, more desperate, echoing through the trees and sending shivers down our spines. We tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was an animal or another group of campers, but deep down, we knew something was wrong. The final blow came when we heard it. A blood-curdling scream that pierced the night, so close it seemed to come from right outside our tent. The scream was unlike anything I had ever heard, filled with pure, unfiltered terror. My heart pounded in my chest, and the air around us suddenly felt thick and suffocating. Fear gripped us, and without thinking, we bolted from the campsite, abandoning our belongings as we ran blindly into the woods. The darkness swallowed us, and every sound seemed amplified, every shadow a threat. We didn't stop running until we reached the ranger station, our breaths coming out in gasps, our bodies shaking with fear. We tried to explain what we'd heard, but our words came out in a jumbled, frantic voice. The ranger, skeptical but concerned, agreed to check our campsite the next day. When they returned, they found it undisturbed. Our tents still standing, firewood piled neatly, as if we'd never been there. But the screams, the terrifying screams, reverberated in our minds. No one else heard them, but we did, and they continued to haunt us. A terrifying reminder that some things in the wilderness are better left unexplored. Story 3. Winter break in Maine was a special one, bitterly cold and snow covering everything in sight. It was one of those days when the snow piled up against the windows, and we were all huddled in a friend's living room, trying to keep warm. We were a group of kids, no older than 12, and we had just started watching Titanic to pass the time. The crackling fire in the fireplace made the room cozy, and the howling wind outside only added to the atmosphere. As the movie continued, I noticed something strange outside the window, footprints in the snow. They seemed out of place, a long trail leading from my friend's house and disappearing into the woods behind. I nudged the others, pointed them out, and we all pressed our faces against the cold glass, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The strange thing was, these footprints weren't fresh. They looked like they'd been there for hours, but none of us had been outside since the storm began. Who could have made them? Curiosity got the better of us. We hastily donned coats, hats, and gloves, and without much thought, ventured out into the freezing cold. Snow crunched under our boots as we followed the trail into the woods, the trees towering above us like dark sentinels. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. The only sound was our breathing, which came out in white mist. Finally, the footprints led us to a small, dilapidated house nestled among the trees. The windows were frosted, and the roof sagged under the weight of the snow, looking as if it might collapse at any moment. None of us had ever seen this house before, even though we had lived in the area. There was something about it that felt wrong, like it shouldn't be there. We stood there, shivering not just from the cold, staring at the house. Part of me wanted to move closer to see what was inside, but the fear that was rising kept me frozen. One of us suggested looking through the windows, and we cautiously circled the house, peering inside through the layers of ice. That was when we heard it, a low rumbling noise coming from inside the house. It wasn't wind. It was too steady, too cautious. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the anxiety in the group. We exchanged anxious glances, unsure of what. Then suddenly, the front door creaked open, slowly revealing the dim interior. A shadow moved across the threshold, a dark shape moving in the darkness. Panic surged through us. We didn't wait to see who or what was inside. We turned and ran, stumbling through the snow, the cold air stinging our lungs. It wasn't until we were safely back in the house that we dared to look back. The strangest part, the footprints that had led us there had disappeared. The snow was undisturbed, as if we had never been there. But we knew what we had seen, and the memory of that shadow still haunts us to this day.